This time on the show, Hack the Airwaves. Darren sits down with HackRF creators Mike Ossmann and Jared Boone at Toorcon San Diego. Then, rooting the Netgear NeoTV with just a remote? It's possible with just a little command injection. I'll show you how. And disk imaging in Linux the sexy way. All that and more, this time on Hak5. This segment of Hak5 is brought to you by Domain.com.
Hello, welcome to Hak5. My name is Darren Kitchen.
I'm Shannon Morse.
It's your weekly dose of Technolust.
Hello. Man, it's kind of late, huh?
It's getting there. Why?
Yeah. Are we having a party tonight?
We are, while we record this, so let's tell them about the live stream they missed, Shannon.
Yes, well, we are going to have our good friend Tom Merritt over here to talk about his brand new book.
Check out Hak5.org. We'll probably have a recording, or otherwise,
sure.
Subbrilliant.com and all of the places where the merit of the Tom are found. I am.
You just got back from Toorcon.
I am.
And you had an awesome time.
I had the best time ever. I think I raved about it last week,
You
so
did, yes.
I'll save you from that. But another thing that I think I don't know if I've mentioned is.
I don't think you showed this last week.
Okay, so this is the badge, and
Okay.
a lot of times you get a badge at like a DEF CON or another HackerCon where it's like, oh, cool, PCB, and if you
Right.
solder all this stuff on it, it might do something. This is ready to go as is right now.
And it's a radio, right?
Yeah, this is a radio that operates under, well, among other bands, the 900 megahertz ISM band.
Yes, that's correct.
So
okay.
free and legal to use in all the fun, happy ways here in North America,
Mm-hmm.
or at least in the United States. I'm not sure about Canada, but anyway, another story. It kind of like leads into what we're talking about later today with Mike Ossmann about HackRF. Just the whole idea of like once frequencies become easily accessible to hackers, then we can really start auditing and having fun with them.
Ah, very cool.
Yeah, so like, I love the way that Mike explains this in that basically, if you had to like name a wireless technology, which is the most secured? And to be honest, Wi-Fi.
Radio?
It's Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi?
Well,
Really?
and here's why,
Wi-Fi
right?
is the most secure.
Because remember Wi-Fi 10 years ago?
Oh, no. I was like a baby back then.
That's right. Shannon Morris,
I was
17.
Like, yeah, 17. Almost.
Almost. You're going to be legal next year, I hear.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Pretty much.
So the idea is that 10 years ago, this was crap. Wi-Fi was totally crap. WEP was the norm.
Yeah.
People weren't doing security at all.
My mom was still on that like 5 years ago when I was living at home. It's
And
pretty
so
bad.
the idea is, since it got hacked and then fixed and then hacked and fixed, and it's like now we see hacks like Reaver against WPS, but that's not against Wi-Fi the standard. That's kind of like a side door thing.
Right. Yeah.
But even still, like WPA2, like Enterprise, or even PSK with like AES, like you can do some really secure Wi-Fi stuff, and only because it's been audited and hacked and fixed and hacked and fixed, and that's the way that things get better, right?
Yeah.
So more protocols as cool devices like the Ubertooth One with Bluetooth, or with the Kisby and Zigbee come out, new devices get to actually have that kind of like visibility that we just never had before. Like the fact that any kid could go and pick up like an alpha Wi-Fi adapter, 10 years ago or whatever, and start cracking WEP is a testament to the kind of level of security that we've come to know and love with that now. So I'm really stoked about HackRF in that sense, as well as the other fun stuff that you can do with software-defined radio. I've been really geeking out about it because you guys know, like I did a whole series on like, I love modulation, pulse code modulation, pulse amplitude modulation. It's just like modulate it, baby. That stuff's going good.
You know what I like to do?
Yeah?
I like to hack little Linux boxes.
Oh yeah, what little Linux box are you hacking this week?
Oh, I found this really cool home theater PC. It's called the NeoTV. It's like so random, right? I've never heard of the thing before. But
what's with you and all the home theater PCs?
I don't know.
Because you like you're like
these things
television,
show up on my
right?
desk, and I'm like, what's this? Oh, it runs Linux. Oh, let's hack it. Okay.
Yeah, but okay. Well, I love that it's like, ooh, a thing that'll enable me to like your thought process is what's going to allow me to watch Vampire Diaries most easily.
That is
and then
so
it goes
right.
from that into like, how can I hack it?
Yep. It like makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah,
But
that's the snubs decision tree.
That's my snubs
vampires
triangle.
and hacking. Yeah.
Yep, those two things, and I'm happy. You combine the two, our powers combine.
Yeah, there we go. I was thinking
Vampire
like it's like
hacks.
Hyrule,
Vampire hacks.
Oh Jesus, that's what we need.
Yes. Well, let's go ahead and kick it off with Mike and
let's get into it. We will see you on the other side. If you're setting up a website to start a new business, showcase your portfolio, or publish your blog, domain.com is the best place for your next great idea. You see, if you need a new domain name, consider registering yourself at .com. I know it's kind of obvious, but a .com is the original. It's best. It's like globally understood, immediately lends credibility to your website no matter what you choose. Added benefit if you invest in selling domain names, .coms have the highest aftermarket value, but get this, if you find yourself needing a .com, then domain.com, it turns out they actually have them and they can sell them to you. It's what Shannon and I do. We go over there because they're affordable, they're reliable, they're easy to use, and best of all, they've got an active social media presence on Twitter. Their customer support is great. It's just a fun place to do business. Tweet them at domain.com. Let them know we sent you. Head over to domain.com and they're gonna hook you up with a great offer, 15% off. They're already affordable domain names and web hosting. All you have to do is use the coupon code HAK5 at domain.com's checkout. That's 15% and big savings. Don't forget to use the coupon code HAK5. When you think domain names, think domain.com. Okay, then what is the mission statement for HackRF?
Our mission with HackRF is to enable people in the information security community to experiment with wireless communication systems that they never had the ability to experiment with before. And we want open source hardware to work with open source software for software-defined radio across the widest range of spectrum that we possibly can.
Now, why is it that we haven't had the ability to hack on those sorts of things before? And what are those sorts of things that we're talking about? Because there's a lot of, you ask, any hacker, they say, and you say, hey, are you into wireless hacking? They're going to say, oh yeah, I hack Wi-Fi all the time.
Well, the larger problem is that Wi-Fi, for example, has had some sort of promiscuous mode support for a long time. Pretty much came with the hardware from the very beginning. Almost all other wireless technologies have had no real access to the really low-level packet structure of the communications. And a device like HackRF provides you to get literally as low as you can go as far as the technology is concerned, and build your way all the way up to the very highest levels and fiddle with everything in between.
But you're talking about more than just like that perception of like, oh, wireless hacking is that stuff in 2.4 gigahertz ISM or the 5.8 gigahertz ISM. You're talking about, hey, there's a world of spectrum out here, and it could potentially be our playground, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're targeting a frequency range with HackRF Jailbreaker of 30 megahertz to 6 gigahertz. So, I mean, if you think about the range that we're used to dealing with in like the 2.4 gigahertz band, it goes from 2.4 gigahertz to a little less than 2.5 gigahertz. So, in terms of like the bandwidth of that band, it's just a tiny fraction. When you look at the bandwidth we're targeting with HackRF Jailbreaker, it's 30 megahertz, like times 10 is 300 megahertz, times 10 again is 3 gigahertz, and then another times 2 is 6 gigahertz. And that huge bandwidth we're targeting to cover almost any wireless communication device you can think of.
Yeah, there's a whole world out there. Starting at the low end, you've got all sorts of aviation and transportation systems, lots of communication that is taking place between mobile vehicles like taxis and credit card processing via taxis. Moving on up, you get into the white spaces range, 700 megahertz. And then cellular, 800 up to about 1,000. There's more aviation stuff that's rather interesting in the 1 gigahertz range. And you've got some satellite communications protocols in the 1.5, 1.6 gigahertz range, including GPS. 2 gigahertz, you get another band of cell phones. And then 3 gigahertz and up, you've got things like WiMAX. WiMAX is on a bunch of different frequencies, but there's a whole host of things outside of 2.4 that people really need to start poking at.
So are you surmising that the reason they haven't been poked at is because the hardware hasn't been available, or what?
Well, some of these technologies you can't buy the hardware. Like, if you wanted to go and play with cellular technology, you can't, for any reasonable price, obtain anything that can generate arbitrary cellular packets and transmit them. You also can't, on a cellular phone, get low-level baseband access to the packets that are being received, just period. So
there's no turning your rooted phone into a cell phone tower.
Right. And you kind of have to take it on faith that whatever software is running on the baseband is operating correctly. Right. And there's, as we've seen with any number of technologies, there's no evidence that that's the case.
Well, and actually, to some extent, that is changing a little bit. Like, there are some hacked cell phones that people have been able to do some creative things with, reusing their baseband processors in creative ways. But and also where people have been able to do the most creative things with cellular networks in recent years has been with software-defined radio technology, like we're creating with HackRF as another tool for software-defined radio. But there's so much more that hasn't been done. There are for the 1 or 2 baseband processors that people have figured out how to do creative things with, there are a whole bunch more that they haven't, and a whole bunch more technologies that they haven't. We've seen implementations for things with GSM, but we haven't seen those necessarily translate to other mobile communication protocols. And the phones in our pocket speak a whole bunch of different languages, and we only have tools to work with 1 or 2 of them.
It sounds like we're really in an infancy of software-defined radio when you look at what is available on the market and what, software like OpenBTS would be an example of one where people have said, hey, if you go get the, USRP and you go get this GNU radio, you can put this stuff together to set up your own base station. How do you feel like HackRF fits into play there?
Well, it certainly offers the possibility of being able to build reference implementations or platforms to experiment on for things outside of cellular. And I think that's going to be extremely interesting going forward because of the fact that there really hasn't been any hardware to experiment with all these other technologies yet. But it'll also enable doing sort of non-security related experimentation with these technologies and bringing them into, it's kind of like, the internet being built on very open technologies, and people have over the last 20 years pressed the technologies into all sorts of new service, doing new and unusual things with it that, Tim Berners-Lee never thought of. But because the technology was open and easy to work with, and you didn't require a giant research budget, you could experiment with stuff and see what you could do with this technology outside of the confines of what the creator intended.
So tell me about the open source software and open hardware aspects and how you two, Jared and Mike, as the creators, have come together to create HackRF, how that kind of came together.
Well, we really try to take what has become a traditional open source software development process and apply it to hardware. There are other people in the world who are doing open source hardware, but I don't know of a whole lot of collaborations or projects of this magnitude. Most of the open source hardware that's out there is one person designing something and then releasing the design files. In this case, we've come up with something that is bigger than I think either of us could have done on our own. And so it's a collaboration, and we've been trying to use open source software processes that are common, like communicating over IRC and email, and using a revision control system, which in this case is public, and
you're using like Git for your PCB.
Yeah, absolutely. We're using all of our hardware design files are on GitHub, and so and for the most part, we didn't actually collaborate directly where we were both like editing the PCB at the same time. And mostly the reason we avoided that is because the tools aren't quite friendly enough for that kind of operation yet. But we came up with a method that worked pretty well, where we would collaborate on the conceptual design, and I would say, you know, hey Jared, what do you think about this part? And he'd say, well, how about this part? And then I would kind of rough out how the architecture would look, and he would say, well, maybe you should change this or that. And then I would design a schematic, and then he would critique it, and then I would change the schematic and do the board layout, and then he would critique that. And so most of the actual hands-on design, creating the hardware design files and getting them into the repository was done by me, but he was able to see what I was doing at every step of the way and give me feedback on it very quickly. And we were able to communicate about that very quickly by using IRC and email. And that allowed us to kind of iterate through the process of hardware design very quickly with 2 brains instead of 1. And we even started getting contributions from people who just showed up in our IRC channel. And like some guy shows up and he's like, oh yeah, I'd like to start working with that chip too. Let me help you write some code. And so he started writing code, and so I'm like, okay, I will make you hardware and send it to you. And so we have this kind of exchange where in the open source software world, you see often kind of an exchange of code. In this case, I was kind of trading code for hardware, and it all
back scratching.
Right. We're scratching each other's backs, and it's working out great.
That's awesome. So tell me, how did DARPA's back get into the whole scratching fest here?
Well, I think DARPA's doing more scratching than getting their back scratched, but they may tell you a different story. For some reason, they think that this project has been worth funding, and I can't speak for them, but the reason that I think that it's worth funding is that we're creating something that is going to become bigger than either of us. We're creating something that's a tool that more people can use to do more and more interesting wireless communication security research. And not only research, but practical applications in the field. Like a few years ago, I did some work with Dominic Spill on Bluetooth, using software radio technology to intercept Bluetooth communications. And kind of the big thing that we were able to accomplish was to identify devices that were not in discoverable mode. And at that time, everybody kind of thought that their Bluetooth devices couldn't be discovered if they were in discoverable mode. And we showed it's really not that hard if you have the right tools and software to find these and identify these devices that are in discoverable mode. And I thought, this is great. Now this is kind of busted wide open, and everybody's going to start sniffing Bluetooth and finding devices and being able to get a handle on them in the facilities where they're responsible for security and so forth. And it'll become a part of the kit for security administrators and penetration testers and so forth. But it wasn't. It wasn't widely adopted. And the reason it wasn't widely adopted was because the hardware to accomplish what we were doing wasn't very accessible. And that led me to do the Ubertooth project, but ultimately it led to this project, which is much broader, where I want everyone in our community to be able to have the tools to not only do their own security research and development, but recreate the things that other people have done. And I think that having something that is lower cost and portable is absolutely critical to make that happen. And I think DARPA has agreed with that vision to some extent in that they've clearly indicated that they think this project is worthwhile too. And I suspect it's for kind of the same reasons.
So what were some of the design decisions to actually make this lower cost and portable?
Well, to start with, there was the issue of one of the most important things of a software radio is to have bandwidth, to be able to capture as much bandwidth as you possibly can. And I think the hardest choice came around exactly how we were going to get all the bandwidth that we were capturing or wanting to produce out the antenna from or to the host. And you know, we looked at USB 3, looked at PCI Express, looked at Ethernet, looked at a bunch of different options, and really the only cost-effective way that still offered sufficient bandwidth was just to go with USB 2 high speed. It turns out USB 2 high speed is very common both on the host and in inexpensive microcontrollers. So it seemed like pretty much the best option. And while it does limit the device's bandwidth to some extent, it offers enough bandwidth, enough throughput to cover virtually all of the interesting modulations that are out there right now.
Mike, what about the portability and the frequencies and the way that you've been able to actually get like a single radio to do 30 to 6,000? Yeah, 6,000, right?
Yeah, right. 30 megahertz to 6,000 megahertz, effectively. I guess the main thing that allows us to reach all those different frequencies and still be able to make it portable is choosing the most integrated solutions we can. And the board has several integrated circuits on it, each of which we took great care in selecting. And we have hundreds of emails back and forth from each other and lots of IRC discussion about why we should use this chip versus that chip.
What are some of the properties that come into actually selecting a good chip for an open hardware, open source hacking project?
Well, considering that it's open source, one of our first criteria is that we have the ability to download documentation for the chip for free without having to sign a non-disclosure agreement. This project is 100% NDA free. We do not sign NDAs. And in fact, outside of this project, I've turned down work from people who have said, hey, Mike, we want to hire you for this. Here's an NDA to sign. I say, no, I'm an open source developer. That's what I do. That's how I make my living. I'm not going to sign something that might restrict my ability to do that. And it's really cool to be in a position where I can make that call and just stick to my guns and say we don't do that. So that's one of the first things we look for, is that a part is available. Not only can I buy it 1,000 at a time, but I can buy it one at a time, and anyone can buy it one at a time. I can download the documentation. Anyone can download the documentation. Then we look at the technical merits of a part. Like, that's just like the initial qualification that it's worth looking at a part at all. Well, the technical merits of the part for this project, one of the things we're very concerned with is power consumption. We want to be able to run on USB power, not have to run off of a wall wart. We don't want people to have to carry around power strips and look for power outlets. This is supposed to be a portable, easy to use device, and running off of USB power is very important for that. So across the board, all the integrated circuits that we selected, that was one of the things we looked for, was power consumption. And beyond that, then we're looking at the unique characteristics of each component within the system, and what criteria we had for each part varied depending on how where it fit into the system. I think that maybe the one feature that might be in common among multiple parts would be the fact that we integrated both the transmit and the receive paths together.
So it's not full duplex.
It is not full duplex. It's half duplex, but it does transmit and receive. So the part that has the analog to digital converter also has the digital to analog converter built in. The part that is the intermediate frequency transmitter is also the intermediate frequency receiver, integrated together. The part that's the front end transmit mixer is also the front end receive mixer, integrated together. So that helps us to make the whole project smaller, lower cost, more portable, with lower power consumption.
That's awesome. So what are the actual steps here to getting this out to the public? What are your phases, and where do you see this going?
Well, he can speak more to the hardware manufacturing end, but my opinion as far as the software goes is that we're looking at doing GNU radio integration. That immediately opens up a lot of interesting avenues for people to do things, to build from examples. There's lots of examples of GNU radio graphs that do all sorts of interesting things. We're also looking to push the bandwidth up. We're solidly achieving 10 megasamples per second complex, so that's 10 megahertz worth of bandwidth. The hardware is completely capable of going up above 40 megasamples, or sorry, 40 megabytes per second, or 20 megasamples, or 20 megahertz. Yeah. Chronic problem.
So you're about halfway. You're only scratching the surface. You're at about half of what the hardware is capable of doing right now in software.
Right. In fact, I have tested the USB peripheral above 36 megabytes a second already, with really no effort to optimize it. So we know the ability to get data out of the device or into the device is at least at that magnitude, and by design, by specification, all of the ICs, aside from the USB interface, are also capable of 22 megasamples per second.
Is there going to be a like a HackRF suite, or is the idea to just build on top of other open source platforms?
Well, I think a suite would be interesting. I think that would definitely be a lot of work, and I'm hoping that a community will come together to help out with that. But I also think there's a lot of code to build on already. GNU Radio, for one, is a very good platform that has a lot of low-level modulation, demodulation units inside of it that I'm hoping that we can reuse either directly or at least port to whatever platform is appropriate, depending upon whether we want to do the bulk of the work on the host or if we want to start getting into trying to do some of the work on the processor, on the HackRF itself.
And initially, at least, our primary goal is just to get digitized waveforms in and out of the host computer. So we're just creating an interface between the host computer and an antenna. And for that model, GNU Radio is a fantastic framework. And we really like GNU Radio, and we want to see more activity in the GNU Radio community. And if HackRF actually brings more people to GNU Radio, that would be great. I was just talking to somebody a little bit earlier today, and he was saying, hey, how can I help with the project, with the HackRF project? And after talking to him for a couple minutes, I pretty much told him, you know what? You might be better off helping out with the GNU Radio project. That's where your expertise and your interest might lead you, is to help out with this other open source project that fits together with HackRF.
That's kind of beautiful. And so the phases of deployment and when people might expect to start hacking on this themselves. I know that you guys are launching the beta here at Toorcon. You want to talk a little bit about that and where you see this going in the future?
Right, and we're really excited about the beta program. This is something that I don't know if there's any precedent for this in the open hardware community. We're building a few hundred units of a fairly complex and expensive board and giving it away. So everyone who's here at Toorcon is going to get one of these, and we're giving away these boards to a community that I think will be able to make use of it and experiment with it and help us test it, and maybe contribute a little code back, give us some feedback. It's a beta test, which is very common in the software community world, and with open source software, it's very easy for a lot of people to download some beta code and try it out and give feedback. In the open source hardware world, that isn't as easy because it's so costly to be able to create a whole bunch of units and distribute them to people. And so we have support from DARPA, from the Cyber Fast Track program, for the project as a whole, but specifically we have a significant amount of funding from them for this beta program. They're giving us the ability to give away this hardware and do something that I think is pretty new in the open source hardware world, to do a fairly large scale beta test where we're giving away hardware to accomplish that.
That is so cool to think. DARPA, the people that brought us the internet, helping giving away awesome radio hacking hardware. That is so cool. Where can people get involved with the project? Where can they find the updates for when this hits public status, and people can start, like, even if they have other hardware right now and we want to get involved in like software with the GNU Radio or other components, where can they get in touch with you guys and follow the project?
Sure. Well, the best place to look is greatscottgadgets.com/HackRF. And that's kind of the master web page for the whole project. Mostly what's there is links to other things, links to our GitHub repository, our wiki that's on GitHub. You can find us on IRC, in the HackRF channel, on Freenode. And but the one master place to look is the HackRF page on GreatScottGadgets.com. And the other thing that I would recommend people do is, whether or not they want to work on HackRF, if they think they might want to work on HackRF in the future or use HackRF in the future, is to check out GNU Radio, GNURadio.org. It's a fabulous software radio framework. And download GNU Radio and start playing with it. You can do a lot of things with GNU Radio with little or no hardware. You can use your sound card. You can use low-cost TV tuner dongles that you can buy for $20 to $30. You can just do pure simulations in GNU Radio and get to know it. And if you're a little bit familiar with GNU Radio, then you'll be able to hit the ground running with a HackRF board when you're able to get one down the road.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Darren.
Cheers.